Hey, welcome to Breaking Boxes with No Fun Dave, and our special guest today is Jason Fabok, or Jay Fabok, a former artist for DC Comics, drawing Batman for the last 15 years. You've been doing that kind of stuff.
2010, so
Goodness
13.
gracious! I looked at his resume of art that he's done with DC, and it's extensive. So all of if you've read any Batman in the last 10 years, there's a very good chance that Jay had his hand in one of those books. He and I go back almost 20, not quite 20 years. It's 17 years. Goodness,
Yeah.
well before he was a superstar comic artist. And he's always been a man that has lived outside the box, taken chances, and done amazing things with his life, not knowing where they're going to end up. I was just explaining he likes to jump off the career cliff and hope there's something at the bottom. So, Jay, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Dave. This will be fun.
Uh, yeah, so basically we want to jump in and talk about all the things that you don't see publicly. I mean, right now you can look back at your life, your career, and it's like, oh man, you've made great choices, and I'm sure they were well thought out, and you've taken the safe path to, comic book stardom. But really, that's not quite the case. How did you get started into this thing, Jay?
Yeah, really, I mean, I've been drawing since I was a little kid. Art and creativity have always been there. It's always been a driving force in my life. And even as a child, I realized that that's what made me like fulfilled from a work perspective of things. I remember working in on farms and stuff as a kid, like, 'cause everything around here is all local farms and you could get summer jobs there. And I used to sit there, like, just kind of saying to myself, like, I love the romance of being a farmer because my grandparents are all farmers. So part of that's in my blood. But like, I used to sit there and think, like, I am not a manual labor person. I need to be creative. I want to create things. I want to draw things. I want to make movies. I want to make music. Everything was always in my life has always been leading down a path to creativity. And
You didn't want the alarm to go off and have to go milk cows at 5 a.m.
yeah, it's yeah. I mean, I have I have a there's a romance to it. As I've gotten older, I think one of my goals and my dreams would be to have like a small farm as I get older, to maybe have like some chickens and some stuff like that. Like that's kind of what I want to do in my retirement. But but no, it was like I realized early on I wanted to be creative in my life, and that was something that a goal that I set after. And so everything became in my life became part of follow that goal. Like, what can I do to make that goal a reality? And so, growing up in a small town, you kind of you sit there and you think to yourself, like, how am I ever gonna accomplish this goal? Comic books seemed like a very far off thing for me. Like, how could I ever draw that well to ever get a job professionally in comics? But the thing I didn't understand is the guys who are drawing professionally in comics, these guys have been doing this for years and years and years. They have years of practice, right? And it takes time to build that skill. Through high school, I kind of started to focus more on my art. I actually had a English teacher and my art teacher in high school really encouraged me to go after drawing and the arts and whatnot. And I went to college for traditional animation, and I learned 3D animation and hand-drawn animation there. But the animation thing, I always saw it as a stepping stool towards the greater goal, which was to be an illustrator. I didn't like the act of having to draw out a simplified character 30,000 times to make him walk across a page. I wanted to draw one image really detailed and speak everything I could into that one image, right? Um, after after I finished college, I was actually offered a couple jobs to go do work at an animation studio up in Toronto, and I turned it down because at the time I had kind of I refocused my life on Jesus, and I started to really uh, I had a kind of a spiritual awakening around the time I was 20, 21 years old, and I really wanted to get back and focus on my faith. And I felt a calling to go to a Bible college called Word of Life, and that's where we met. Word of Life Bible Institute up in Owen Sound. And I
And
was,
even during that time, I remember you in your office. You had a little office, and you had your drawing table, and you were practicing backgrounds and buildings and perspectives when everybody else was out playing or doing other things. And it's interesting how the skills that you learn, the things that we're really passionate about, we put effort into when nobody else is watching, and in that effort, that process that you're doing, is honing those skills that you're going to need in the next chapter. It's just a little aside there, but you may continue.
yeah, yeah. I spent 2 years there, and it's funny because I kind of felt like when I went there, I kind of felt like art, my art career path or life was kind of dead. Like I didn't really, I kind of thought like, okay, I'm going to Bible college. Maybe my calling is somewhere else. Like maybe I'm going to be like a pastor or a missionary, or I'm going to go do off and do something else. But and I kind of put the art thing away for a little bit and focused on what I was doing there at school, which was learning scripture, learning the Bible inside and out, learning theology, learning apologetics, all the stuff that really I'm interested in as well. Like I have a passion for that as well. And I was my thinking was I wanted to build a good foundation scripturally so that once that foundation stands, it's going to help me for the rest of my life. It's the same thing with art. I was at that time I was still drawing, I was still doing stuff, but I was building that foundation there as well. But the foundation, my art foundation, was kind of weak, and I needed somebody to help me hone that skill. And while I was there at Bible college, like a lot of great things happened to me. I met my wife. We started dating while we were there, and if I wouldn't have
I
gone to,
photographed his wedding too, so that
yes,
there's I can attest to he
yeah,
did actually marry this lady.
yeah,
And then you did like I'm gonna call it one of your career jumps, of reaching out into space and hoping that something was there. Uh, you ballsed up and reached out to, I don't know if it was one person or some people, but tell us how the next bit of that went.
yeah. So I was there for 2 years at the Bible Institute. The second year I was there doing video and graphic design. So I was doing some artsy stuff. Like I was having fun with my talents that God has given me, and I was trying to hone them and find like where can I go with this. At the same time, I was really getting into comic books again. There was a couple big books. One of them was a book called Blackest Night by Jeff Johns. He had written a great comic book series, and Jeff and I now have a great working relationship. But at the time, he was an up and coming rising superstar in comics, and I remember reading his work in that impact house where I was staying laying on my tiny little bed and reading these works from Jeff and just thinking like, wow, like I really got the fire going in me again about wanting to pursue a career path. And so I was working on a portfolio. I reached out to somebody who is local to me here in Windsor, Ontario area, David Finch, who at the time was the biggest comic book artist at Marvel. He was doing Avengers. He was doing Wolverine and X-Men stuff, and he was huge. And uh, I decided to kind of take a chance, and I sent him an email with my portfolio. And all I asked him was, could you give me a couple pointers on what I could do to possibly get better? I want to
Now,
learn. I want to get better.
pause before you tell us what happened from that email. What was your thought process before it? I'm sure that it took you a while to actually press the send button.
Well, I didn't think he would respond. Um,
Mm.
I I knew there was two things. He came and talked to my class when I was in animation college. He came and talked to us, and that was a real eye opener because I realized, holy smoke, there's a guy who lives in my area of small farm towns, who made it and is working for Marvel Comics. So it kind of clicked in my head. Wait a minute, maybe I can do this too. Like if somebody's done it. And then I ended up learning that there's a lot of different guys from my area who were working professionally in Marvel DC. And it's like, okay, like a light bulb. It's like I don't have to live in New York or LA
Right.
to do this job. I can do it. So that was number one. And then number two, a friend of mine who I went to animation college knew him. And so I was able to get his email through him. So I was a little bit sly.
Insider access.
Yeah. And I dropped his name too. I said, hey, his name was Pete. I said, Pete gave me your email and I thought I would reach out. But I thought, you know what, this guy's busy. He's not going to have time. But I was hoping even for just a little something. And it's something I remember because I get asked a lot from different people at conventions and also through email if I will review their portfolios. And I really don't have time to go too deep into it, but I always try to give a good positive and one thing that they can work on. Because I remember how, Dave took that time to email me back. So I try my best to do that. And I'm sure I've failed at that, but I try my best to do that when somebody messages me and take that little bit of time just to say something encouraging, but also something that they can work on that I see in their work. The email I got back from Dave was, why don't you come to my house and I'll show you? Now I'm living up in Owen Sound, which is 6 hours away from Windsor. I'm up at the Bible Institute. So I remember I just got I got my car, and I remember I drove down to meet with him, and Dave is very truthful, and he just like totally trashed my portfolio. Like I think he was kind of, honestly, I think he was testing me though. Looking back on it now, he was seeing if I could take criticism. Because a lot of people will, when they're faced with such harsh criticisms about the work, especially artwork, which is very personal, like you're spending hours drawing this stuff. I think he was kind of testing me to see, like, are you going to flip out if I rip your work apart, or are you going to take it? Because guess what, buddy? Like, you better if you want to work in comics, you better get an iron spine, because you're going to be critiqued, you're going to be made fun of. You're going to have your books reviewed bad. Nobody is perfect. It doesn't matter if you're the greatest artist ever. There's somebody who's out there critiquing you, especially it's gotten worse now in the social media age. At that time, social media just kind of started. You weren't really seeing a lot of this stuff but nowadays it's like you got to be able to take some criticism and to know when something is true criticism and when something is just somebody being a jerk, right? But Dave,
Right.
he knew what he was doing, and I was humble enough at the time to realize, okay, I'm not Mr. Great. I need to learn, and this is the best person to teach me, to do this. Who else are you gonna have to teach you other than a guy who is literally at the top of his game? The guy knows what he's doing. And so he invited me back. I ended up going to his house once or twice a week. It was like every other day for about 6 months. I ended up leaving the Bible Institute at that time because I was really focused on I was really praying about, like, Lord, if this is what you want me to do, open the door. If it's not, close this door. Close it. I don't want to get my hopes up. Like, either open it, but the doors just kept blowing open. Like it was like a breeze would just blow that door. So I knew it was like, okay, this is the path I need to walk. And Dave really, it became, I've always described it as, it was like a boot camp. It was like a comic book boot camp. It was, I'm going to show you something. I'm going to show you how to draw a hand. Or I'm going to show you how to draw a head or a building or a car. Now go home and fill up one page with heads, cars, hands, whatever I'm telling you, and then bring it back in 2 days, and I'm going to critique it, But the way I started doing it was, if he told me to fill up one page, I've always been the kind of person who wants to go that extra length. I want to go further. So it was like, I'm going to bring back 3 pages or 4 pages. Like, I'm going to go over and above. I want to show this guy I want this job, right? So I would do that, and he would critique it. Sometimes he was very harsh, but I learned very quickly what to do, what not to do. And he was taking time out of his day. Like, now that when I really realize this, like, I think about the hours I'm spending and the deadlines I have and how tight they are. He was sometimes taking an hour out of his day to teach me something. And sometimes
That's
I
awesome.
know that sometimes I know, like looking back on it too, sometimes I could sense he was like caught off guard, like I was there. He told me to come, but then he forgot because he was just in his world drawing. And I show up, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I gotta teach you today." But he, now I realize that I really realize the sacrifice that he made to teach me, and I'm forever grateful for that. He's still my favorite artist. He's still the person I look up to the most, even though we're now like work colleagues, we're in the same industry. I still see him as like somebody to strive for, somebody that I'm forever grateful for. And he and his wife both have been massive, massive help for me and for Sarah and for our career, for our life. And so anyway,
It's often awesome to have people that pour into you, and it. I always say that life is meant to be lived together, and that the more people that we bring around ourselves, whenever we have something joyful happen, exciting happen, the first thing we have to do is share it with somebody else. We are overflowing with the desire to share with the people around us. So when you do find people like that, you gotta jump in and put yourself on the bottom. You put it's an intentional debasing or humbling, humilitying,
yeah,
humbling of yourself to allow them to come over top and to teach you what they know or to pour into you. And if we live life with an open palm and an open cup, shall we say, and our cup's not full, there's people around us that will fill it up. But if you live life with a full cup where nobody can pour in, then all of a sudden, nobody really wants to talk to you. Nobody wants to share anything because, well, you already know everything. So why bother
yeah,
sharing? But it's really interesting to hear. So I'm gonna press the fast forward button here a little bit. So
yeah.
you I think went to work with him. You were drawing backgrounds for him at one point.
Yeah, the first like ever job I did was I did a couple back. He was training me to be what's called a pencil assist. So
Okay.
uh, a lot of bigger artists, especially in the older days in the 50s, 60s, 70s, they would have guys who they would focus. The main artist would focus more on drawing the things that really matter, the characters, the big action scenes. Those things take a long time to do, and you're on a tight deadline. You're trying to draw a page a day. They might rough in the background that they want, but then they would have pencil assists go and do all the tedium of drawing a million windows and doing all this kind of stuff. So he was kind of training me to do that job. But at the time, he had just transitioned over to DC, and he was doing cover work. And he's like, I'm not going to have any interior work for a while. Let's put your portfolio out there. Let's see if we can get you a job. And so that's how I made my jump into professional comics. I got a job.
And then you went to there was a company you were with first before DC.
Yes, they were called
I'm
Aspen
going back a
Comics.
lot of years. I don't know if you can
Yeah.
remember that far back now.
Yeah. Yeah, because I worked with DC for a book and then for 2 issues, and then I didn't hear anything back. And
Right.
I used all my money to buy an engagement ring and get engaged, and then I didn't have any work. And I remember telling Dave this, and he said, "Let's go, let's go." He invited me out to a comic convention that was in Chicago. The C2E2 was the first year, I think it was in 2010 that it was open. And I went there and I met with the guys at Aspen Comics. They're a smaller comic publisher, and working with them, I was able to kind of learn the ropes a bit at a slower pace and kind of build up my ability to draw within a certain time period. Like drawing a book in a month is going from nothing to all of a sudden having to do that is it's terrifying. It's like it's unbelievable the amount of stress that you go through trying to hit those deadlines. Now I'm able to do it if I really need to. I can do it. I've transitioned out of that monthly schedule. I didn't like doing that, and I stopped. But but I learned that through Aspen. So again, I'm very grateful to those guys as well, because that then led to me a year later going back to DC and then working with them full time for, I don't know, 10, 12 years,
And
so
I remember after talking to you after you had your first book with DC back after Aspen, and you were explaining the level of detail and effort you were putting into that book, and hand cramps and not be able to hold the pencil or stay up long enough to continue on this, so that you could show that you could hit deadlines and you didn't have to ask for extensions, and that it was done to the expectations that you had, and that sort of set the pace for your career for the next 10 or 12 years, because they always expected you to deliver on time and to deliver top quality, which requires an awful lot of character, shall we say, and not character drawing, like actual human character of sitting in your office long enough and coming up with ideas of how to draw something to make it look amazing.
Yeah.
And of course, so I'm going to ask the question that everybody always wants to ask about drawing Batman, and that is, when you're drawing all of the details of his muscles, are you like looking in the mirror and comparing them to yours first and then putting them on paper, or?
Um, I I I do use a lot of, maybe not myself because I'm not a buff dude,
Oh,
but it's, I do use a lot of reference for my work. It's something that I think everybody thinks nobody does, but a lot of comic artists use reference, whether it's an action figure that they pose, or whether it's a, like, I even have a, I had this, somebody made this and I saw it online. It's like a Batman head based off of my Batman design. And so, like, I'll use this, to get, like, you can even just see just from the lighting, you can get cool
yeah,
shadows on this thing. Like, I'll use whatever I can to kind of help me do that. I've had my wife pose many times. She, there's even just recently, there's a cover for one of the book that I'm putting out here. There's a female character called Direwolf, and there's a cover that I did, and I was like, heavens, I was struggling. So I said, Sarah, hold this broom, pretend it's a spear, and pose for me in this specific pose. And she did, and I took a picture, and then I used that as reference to kind of get that pose. It's like, you use whatever you can to give you some inspiration and to get you through, especially facial expressions. It's great to have a camera on a phone that you can take. My phone is, I have to go through every once in a while and delete all the stupid pictures of myself doing these wild faces. But it's a way of capturing some sort of, some expression, some subtlety. I learned that in animation college, because when we were learning that, like, all these Disney animators, like, they would film themselves doing the movement like a cartoon character so that they could watch it back and get a more natural animation. They didn't just come up with the stuff out of their heads. Like, they were
right.
studying reference, and so it's the same thing with me. I'll use whatever I can um, to get that reference to make the end product, the best it can be. That's all that matters. Is I need that person to, when they read that panel, most people will spend 2 to 5 seconds looking at a comic book panel, and then they move to the next one. My job is just to be like, I want it to look detailed and cool enough that your brain registers it, but then you don't see anything that's too jarring, so that you just move to the next panel and you move to the next panel, and it absorbs you into the story. That's the goal of the comic book artist, is really just to keep you moving through the story. And then sometimes people will go, hey man, wow, that was a pretty cool panel. Let me look at that. But unless you're artists, like, a lot of people, they just look at it and they go, wow, that's cool. And it gives them an emotion, a feeling, and then they move
Mm-hmm.
on to the next thing. And
Everything but covers.
yeah,
Okay, so you spent a decade with DC doing the most awesome stuff. I know. Is it the two Jokers or three Jokers?
three
That
jokers,
was
three jokers.
three Jokers. That was a beautiful piece of artwork. Um, anyways, and now, so let's skim over all those amazing parts. It's like in a movie, right? It's like, oh, you got the character development, and then you get to the good, like, happy times of life. And it's like, oh, okay, fast forward that, move
Yeah,
on, and you are upsetting the apple cart all over again with another career defining leap off of a cliff, hoping that there's something down at the bottom. You've left DC,
yeah,
and you are doing something completely different because there's a gap in the market. Tell us what's going on.
yeah. We actually just announced in New York at New York Comic Con just last year, 2023, in October. We announced a brand new comic book company called Ghost Machine. This is what makes us special is the fact that we are a comic book company that's owned by the creators. Okay, like DC and Marvel, loved working for them. It was a great honor to work for them and to work on these characters. But I didn't own any of the characters that I worked on. I didn't own anything from the company. Even if I created a brand new character for them, a lot of the times you might make a little bit of money if they appear in a movie or a TV show or whatever, but you really like you don't own it. You don't own anything.
It's not yours. You're an
It's not
employee
yours.
of DC or of
Yeah,
Marvel. Yeah.
I'm a contracted guy who comes in and and again, it's cool to work. It's my whole life, my goal was I want to work on Batman. Like that was my goal getting into the industry. Well, the first ever book I ever did professionally was a Batman issue, Superman Batman. Like, so I completed my goal pretty quick. And then it was like, okay, now what do I do? Well, I want to work on Batman books that will stand the test of time. That became like the next goal. And I got to do that through Detective Comics and Batman Eternal and then Batman 3 Jokers, which was the last thing I did at DC, is what they call in the industry an evergreen. It's going to sell forever. It constantly comes in and out of the top 10 of DC graphic novels. It stayed in the top 10, I think, for about 2.5 years. Like, I mean, it's incredible to think that that book has had that kind of staying power. But that's what I set out to do. Like we set out, Jeff Johns and I, when we did that book, it's like, let's create something that feels timeless and epic, that's deep, that's a little dark, but also has a story about hope in the end. So we did that. And then after I finished that book, it was kind of like, what am I going to do? We literally had a conversation where like, what do we do next? How do we top this? What can we do? And the answer was, there is nothing. Like there is nothing at DC or Marvel. We had worked on Justice League together and had a really big Justice League run. And I got to draw all the great characters and it was a lot of fun. And that was really cool, but it's like, where do I go? And so we discussed even going over and doing Marvel stuff at one point too, but that didn't really excite me. What excited me was the thought of, let's create new things. Let's try to go out and create something new. It seems like everything in media, comics, everything is a rehash of stuff that was made either, like in Batman's case, 80 years ago, or it's a rehash of Star Wars stuff, bringing back new Star Wars, new Star Trek. It's everything that's existed before. Like they keep just rebooting and remaking this stuff. And I was starting to look at things like Stranger Things on Netflix. This is something that has its roots in classic. It's got that nostalgia factor because it's in the 80s. It's got Dungeons and Dragons. It's kind of a horror thing, kind of like Goonies and Ghostbusters, but it's its own thing, and it was very refreshing to see, hey, this is something new and it's exciting and it's cool and it's interesting. And it's like, I want to do that in comic books. Like that became the goal. It's like, I want to create something new that I can have a legacy in, but that I also own and that I can control creatively. Like Jeff and I are working on the book, but we both have creative say and control in what we want to do. If we want to slap this stuff on a t-shirt, we can. Nobody can tell us that we can't do it. Whereas DC, they were in control of that stuff. And you could say like, hey, this Joker book's really big. Why don't you slap that image on a t-shirt? And the answer was, well, that's too much work. They have to go through all these chains of things because they've become too big, whereas we
Right.
just with Ghost Machine, we want to make a t-shirt. We make a deal with a t-shirt company.
You could make a tea cozy with it if you really wanted.
We could do whatever we want. We've made mugs and all kinds of stuff. So the goal shifted in my life. And but like going back to what you said about taking a leap off a cliff, this move to create a company is not what you're supposed to do. It's not the safe bet. The safe thing is to stay at DC and Marvel, where you get paid very well, and just work with them, draw whatever they ask you to draw. I mean, I'm working with Jeff Johns, who is arguably, he's a top 3 writers of the last 30 years. Like the guy has everything that he's done, all the DC movies, everything is always based upon stuff that he's written because he wrote such iconic runs of the characters because he's such a great character writer. He knows how to write character. And that's his big focus. And that's our focus with our company as well, is character-driven stories. The spectacle is great. Big spectacle and all that kind of stuff is cool. but it's the character stuff that really matters to people because that's what people can relate to. And
Right.
I got to work with him, and we could have went off and we could have done more Batman, and we could have done other things as well. And I could have stayed at DC and we could have had a pretty cushy time. But there's always that bug, there's always that thing inside that's saying like, no, you need to create something new. You gotta create something new. Like you complain, I'm always complaining about how everything is a rehash. Well, what am I doing about it? Am I just sitting
You're
there
rehashing
quitting?
everything.
I'm just rehashing everything, and I can ride on the coattails of Batman. That's great. Uh, but I don't know. It felt like this was the time. This was the time to take a chance, and so we decided to go out, and this was something that happened over about 2 years. There was a bunch of different people working with Jeff. Gary Frank, who had worked with Jeff on some huge books at DC, Doomsday Clock, which was like a mashup of Justice League and Watchmen, and he had done a bunch of Gary Frank is one of the best artists alive. He's one of my biggest inspirations. And he and Jeff were doing a creator-owned book at Image Comics. And then Brian Hitch, who was the one who all of the Avengers movies, the designs, all of that stuff is based off of his work. Like he did this series called The Ultimates back in the early 2000s, where they reimagined the Avengers, and everything from those movies is based off of his work. And he was in the same place. He's like, he did all this great stuff. Did he ever see a cent from any of it? He didn't own any of that, right? Marvel owns all of it. So he and Jeff were talking about doing a series together, and then we decided, like, as time went by, it's like, why don't we create a company where we own the company? We're not beholden to somebody else. We, as the creators, we are doing creator-owned work, which is what kind of the independent comic book, it's kind of what it's called, where the creators own the work. So we're doing that, but we also are a creator-owned company in the sense that we own the company. And we looked at other companies out there who have done this in the past. There's a company that we're working with to publish our books. They're called Image Comics. And a little bit of a comic book history lesson was Image Comics back in the early 90s was started by 7 creators who were some of the biggest creators at the time. Todd McFarlane, who was drawing Spider-Man, Rob Liefeld, Jim Lee, Mark Silvestri, and Eric Larson. All these guys were the biggest guys in comics at the time. And again, they were feeling discontent because they were creating these books that were selling millions of copies for DC, Marvel, but they weren't receiving anything back for that. So what did they do? They left and they created Image Comics, which was a creator-owned company. And they started this, and they in the end, a lot of them kind of left and went off and did their own things. But like Todd McFarlane is still there. He created Spawn, which has now hit over 350 issues. So it's like, and he built a toy company, and he built all this other stuff out. And out of that Image Comics came The Walking Dead and a bunch of other shows that kind of spawned out of Image Comics and became more than just comic books. These creators had control over what they were doing. But the Image Comics still today will publish your work, but if you have your work published through Image Comics, Image doesn't own your stuff, but you don't own any part of Image. Well, we wanted to change that, where with Ghost Machine, you own a piece of Ghost Machine. And so through this, we actually own a little bit of each other's work, which means it's like that saying, a rising tide raises all ships. It's like this is the first time I've ever felt in my career like a true full collaboration and teamwork with a group of people who all have a like mindset of, we want to create great new character-driven stories. We want to build a fan base. We just want to create really good comics that everybody can read. And
if I understand correctly, you want to create great stories which then move through the funnel, if you were, of creative things in our world. A lot of us don't read comics. We watch movies instead, or TV shows. But as you're saying, they all come from the comic ideas and the ideas that are hashed up in the back room. Hey, what if we make a character that does this, and
Yeah.
then build that character, which then drives the creative industry. And if
Hmm.
the book performs well and people like the story, then it's moved into a TV show or a movie. And
Yeah.
so you're saying that the artists themselves want part of the whole process from creation right to final consumption of T-shirts
Yeah.
and movies and
Yeah.
not popcorn sales yet. I don't think you
Yeah.
can
Well,
bust into
maybe
popcorn sales, but
we'll see. We'll see. But yeah, and having somebody like Jeff Johns kind of spearheading all this, he's had such a remarkable career in comics, but he also helped run DC. He was number two at DC for a while, so he knows the publishing industry, and he produced and wrote a number of movies for Warner Brothers. So he has his foot in all three of those things, and he's had successes. He's also had failures too, and you learn from those failures and how to be better with and what not to do, what to do. So he's taken all of that knowledge, and we surrounded ourselves with other people in this company who are helping us run the business side of things, who have had massive successes with creating businesses and businesses that have stood the test of time. So we built from the ground up this business plan that is really solid. It's not it's not so crazy, like our expectations aren't so crazy that we have to sell millions of books. No, it's like we're very conservative with our estimates on what we want to do. We want to be at a point where we're content doing what we're doing and making the best comic book work that we can. And we also have people in our business, in our company, that know how to then take those ideas and expand them out. But like we were saying before we started recording, like we are going to have the ability to have our hand in the creative process. You kind of just brought this up all the way through. Whereas a lot of guys, once they sell their media rights into Hollywood, Hollywood just takes it and goes nuts and does whatever
and
they want.
does whatever they want with the
Yeah,
story too.
we're gonna have that ability to control the content and to make sure that it sticks to the source material, which is what the comic book fans want. That's the biggest gripe that comic book fans have with a lot of the movies and TV shows that get translated is they've changed it. Like, how come you can't just have Wolverine in a yellow costume? Well, it looks goofy. No, it doesn't. It will work if you just did it, right? And guess what? Now they're doing that with the new Deadpool Wolverine movie. It's like, but it only took them 25 years to realize this. It's like we will have our hand in that, and that's an exciting prospect. But really, it comes back to
You can have Silk Spectre in a yellow suit. You know why?
yeah. I mean, yeah,
why
uh,
why not Wolverine?
yeah. Um, the interesting thing though too is really we know that the basis of this is all good comics. We're not getting too
Right.
far ahead of ourselves. We want to create great comic books because we believe that we can have great success just in the comic book industry alone. Like we know that we like and we also know that it's going to take us some time to do this because one of the things we've kind of you learn and I've always known is it's you put out a Batman Joker series, yeah, you're going to sell 300,000 copies of that book because it's Batman and Joker who are selling the book. Even though as a creator, you can think like, oh yeah, I've done some great things. People are going to buy the book because of the creative team. That's part of it, but really it's the characters that are selling. The reason why these things are selling as big as they can. When we've taken the risk is like we're leaving that and we're now creating new things, and we know that it's going to take time. It's a long game where it's going to take time. We got to build these characters. We got to build them issue by issue by issue, and we got to build the audience issue by issue by issue. And we do that by being consistent, by putting out books consistently, by putting out high quality work, and by putting out work that we believe is that really is good story. Like we have great storytellers who know how to do this. We have great artists who know how to do what their jobs as well. And I believe we have great characters and things that are diverse and different. And we're not doing straight superhero stuff. It's like that's DC and Marvel have that market. Like they have all the superheroes you could ever want. We want to do something that's a little bit more genre. Comic books used to be a whole bunch of different genres: monster books, horror, suspense. westerns, even romance stuff. I don't think we're going to dip our toe into romance, but
That's not going to be your character, anyways.
no. But it's like we kind of have taken all of those genres, and it's like, well, what if we have a kind of superhero-y character in this genre, but it's really a genre book. It's a science fiction. It's a post-apocalyptic. It's a history book. Redcoat that Brian Hitch is working on is a really cool idea about this redcoat British soldier during the Revolutionary War, American Revolutionary War, who discovers that George Washington and a bunch of other characters are immortals, and they're part of a secret.
That's awesome.
And they're part of like a secret society, and he becomes an immortal. And so then he's like the books and the stories are him through different periods of time teaming up with Davy Crockett to hunt Sasquatches in like the American wilds, or him teaming up with a young Albert Einstein, who's trying to discover like what's the science behind your immortality. And this part of the funny part about this character is it was a joke that actually Brian Hitch said, was that it's like, if he lived forever, would he ever learn from his mistakes? And he said, no, I don't think I'd ever learn from my mistakes. I would still make the same mistakes. And so that's what this character is. He's kind of funny. He never learns from his mistakes, even though he's lived for hundreds of years. And so there's lots of fun storytelling that can be done with a character like that. And it's new.
So within this Ghost Machine thing, your brainchild is this Rook character, this Rook storyline. Is that correct?
Yes.
So give us, I mean, it's been in your brain for the last 20 years. This is something you dreamed up in your bedroom as a kid, I think you said?
Yeah. Like this character, there's been shades of him throughout time. This character, this masked bird-headed character with a trench coat kind of deal. It's always been there. But I never knew where it should go. At one point, it was like a fantasy story. Then it became more of a film noir kind of thing set in like a 1930s. Then it became a science fiction thing. And originally I pitched this thing with Jeff where it was like science fiction meets like Tolkien fantasy. But he was like, I don't know. He wasn't really feeling it. But he really was struck by this idea of this character with this helmet that looked like an animal. And so he kind of brought up this idea, what if we have other characters with these animal helmets? That spawned this whole universe and this whole idea. And so Rook Exodus is what the book is called. It's a science fiction action adventure Western. It's like Star Wars meets Mad Max, with some Clint Eastwood in it. And
it is out, right? It's produced and written, and where are we with that?
It's coming. Issue 1 hits April 3rd. So it's not out yet. We did a preview issue called Ghost Machine 1, which came out in January, which previewed all of our upcoming books and series.
Oh, cool.
And so April is when all of our the first 3 books, Geiger, Rook, and Redcoat, all launch in April of this year. But the short of like kind of the spiel about Rook is that he's on this planet that was humanity had total control over everything, including nature, and they created a utopia. And people from Earth left in this event called the Great Exodus to this planet. And Rook was a farmer on Earth who hated crows because they were always eating his crops. And he came to this planet for a new start. He ran away from the problems that he had. But when he got to this new planet, things didn't go too well either. The world engines have failed. People who could get off the planet did, leaving back survivors who weren't able to escape. And the planet is slowly dying. It's coming to back to its place of where it's uninhabitable. Rook, he at some point in the past became what we call a warden. They are these characters who have these helmets that kind of look like an animal that allow them to control the animal life of that specific animal. So Rook can control crows and ravens and rooks. And he is a scavenger just like them. He is searching the wastes of this planet to build a rocket ship, a spaceship, so that he can get off, so he can run away from his problems, right? That's a major theme. Are you going to stay and fight, or are you going to take flight? And Rook is a character. He's doing this. He doesn't want anything to do with this planet. He just wants to get out of there. There are other wardens on this planet, like a character we have Direwolf. and she is the warden of the wolves. And so she has a wolf mask, and she has a pack of wolves that she can control. And she's kind of trying to spur Rook on, like, we can do something, we can save this planet, like, join me. And they've had a history in the past as well, a bit of a romantic history. So, we kind of have that going on there. So there is a little bit of romance in our series.
So is it fair to say that your animal drawing skills are leveling up as we speak?
Yeah, it's still really tough though. I'll say that. Like, drawing animals is a different beast, man. Like, no pun intended. But
Yeah.
uh, but it's a lot of fun because I when we were kind of going through this and thinking about action adventure sequences where it's like you have a character, you have Rook, and he's got this bird mask on, and he's shooting laser guns at another character who might have a bear mask on, and in the background you have bears fighting a swarm of birds. It's like, when have you ever seen that? Like, when have you,
Well,
like,
and how big are the birds compared to the bears, and
well, and
how
that's the
would they
cool thing
fight?
about the other thing, kind of part of our world too, and part of our mythology, is that on this planet, because of the perfect atmosphere, animals, alpha animals especially, got really big. So you're not just going to find like a normal sized grizzly bear. You're going to find a grizzly bear who's like 20 feet tall, and it's like, what if you have 20-foot tall grizzly bears fighting wild boars the size of a horse? you know
That'd be a bear hug.
yeah, oh yeah, that's a good pun there. uh so it's like our imaginations just exploded, and it's like they're fighting in abandoned cities, in wild, North American style wildernesses. It was just a really cool idea, and we started to really see all of this really fun. It kind of felt, we described it early on as like, it feels like an 80s cartoon show. Like, you got these animal characters. Each character has a cool vehicle that kind of looks like the animal. Like, we really started to lean into this idea. Like, at first we were like, is it too goofy to have characters running around with animal helmets? But then it was like, no, no, no. Let's really lean into this. Let's lean into those sort of characteristics, the stereotypical character. Like, we have a character named Swine, and he controls the wild boars. Well, he's also a stinky, smelly guy, like, dirty, stinky. Like, he's kind of taken on the aspects of what a boar would be. He's kind of brash. He charges in, but he's also stinky, a bit smelly. But and he likes to eat. Like, and so it's like we kind of, and Rook kind of takes on those aspects of the crow, and Direwolf the aspects of a wolf. And so it's a lot of fun, and we really realize, like, we have almost a near unlimited expanse of characters that we can create with this. So we can introduce new characters, and we have a whole ton of them that we've come up with that we're going to introduce as time goes by.
It's interesting when you talk about creating worlds and like that, ideas that are, well, it's not, you're not just creating a character, you're creating the character and the world that they're in, and what else could be there. I'm going to relate back to non-comic book. We watched with the kids the original Iron Man not long ago, and then right afterwards we watched one of the Infinity Wars series, the Avengers series, and it's like the difference of character development or character assumption when you're watching the Avengers ones. You have, in order to appreciate it the way it's written and enjoyed, you have to have known the 32 other movies that came out, so that you understand the character development of this person, this person, this person. And what's so exciting about where you are right now is that you're in episode 1.
Yeah.
Like, it's just introducing the ideas. What kind of characters are going to come in and change the landscape as you continue. So 35 episodes from now, and you're looking back, and you've got this this, I'm going to use the word conflab because my wife likes that word, but this gathering of these masked creatures that are battling now a greater problem that's happening, and having all the development of all those different creatures in there, knowing that you had a part of it, and a creative outlet together to do that. I'm very excited for you. I'm jacked.
Yeah, it is. It's exciting, but going back to the whole fight or flight thing, that's something that's a major theme about our story. It's this character who who it's like when he's faced with a challenge, when he's faced with that like adversity in his life, it's like he kind of wants to run away. That's me. That's kind of how I felt, especially over the last few years when things got pretty rough. With different things that were going on in our world and the way that different rules and government things that were happening. It's like I want to escape. My natural. I was kind of joking about becoming a farmer. It's like my natural kind of thing is I want to take my family and move off into the middle of nowhere and just try to cut the world out and leave the world behind. That's me. I relate to Rook because of that. But Jeff Johns is the one who's always saying to me, if you run away and you go off and you like, who's going to stay to fight? Who's going to be the person to stand up, or who's going to be a person to do the right thing or a good thing or to build something new? And it was like, that was it's also kind of the attitude with this whole company. It's like I could stay in the safety of DC Marvel, and I could just stay there for the next 20 years, and I could work, and I could probably do it even I could kind of take a step back and go, you know what, I'm not going to care as much anymore. I'm not going to put the time into it. I'm just going to draw whatever and spend most of my time doing other things. I could kind of really call it in. And that would be me kind of in that flight mode. It's kind of like I'm kind of staying safe, and it's this is Ghost Machine is us almost in that fight mode. It's like, no, let's do something new and interesting and different. We know it's going to be a fight. We're going to have to win an audience. Like, we have to deliver good stories, good characters, and we know our sales are going to go like this and like this and like this and like that. We want to get them at a good consistent base that's rising ever so slightly, and you do that by being consistent, by building up good stories, building up an audience, and that's the fight. That's me saying, no, okay, I'm gonna try something new. I'm gonna try something different. I'm going to I'm going to say no to those anxieties and those fears, those worries, and I'm going to trust that this is the door that's open now and before me, and I need to trust that this is the right move, that this is the right path, and this is where I'm going to learn. I'm going to grow as a person. I'm going to learn new things about business. I've learned so much now about what it takes to create comic books outside of just drawing. Like I know the whole process. I now know like how much money like you have to put into it as a budget. Like you can't just throw as many covers as you want on it. Every cover costs you money as a company to put on your book. So you have to there's a balance there, and it's like I'm learning all of these new things about business and how to work and how to. It's going to make me a better artist, a smarter
better person,
a better person. Like Jeff challenges me so much on just things in life, and it goes beyond just drawing comic books. Like Jeff and I have a really strong relationship, and he's not afraid to challenge me on things when I'm in the wrong, and help to guide me through this. Yeah, it's there is a sense of risk, and it is a little scary to take that step out, but I have confidence that this is where I need to be, and this is what I need to do at this time. And my greater dream of all this is I would love these characters in these books to outlive me. I would love to be part of training the next generation of great artists and writers to come in and to take over these characters and to respect them and to grow them and create a new place for artists to be able to work where they have that creative control and that ownership of what they're doing and what they're creating. That to me is very exciting, and that to me is.
Well, and you have a platform where people can bring their ideas that they've been thinking of since they were in their bedrooms, dreaming about comics, and have a platform to be able to present that. So basically, you're at a position where you need to learn to enjoy the process and trust that what's going to come out of it is I'm going to say what you hope, because I can't really say it's good or bad. It's new,
Yeah.
there's no reference.
Yeah.
It's, it's getting up, it's doing the work, it's finding out what's happened. As I've said many times before, what's the best that could happen?
Hmm.
Well, best that could happen is pretty good.
Yeah.
It's it's worth the effort to find out.
Yeah.
So
For sure.
I know that you said you had to cut off here right around this time, so I'm going to say there is going to be, we can continue here for a second, but there's going to be a part two, and we're going to do the part two after April, after early April. So we'll do like mid-April, after some of the stories have launched, so we can dive into that a little bit more, and
Yeah.
learn about some of these new characters, as well as some of the other crazy things in life, like I don't know, family and life, and
Yeah.
um, you know there's yeah, comics are fun, jobs fun, careers wonderful, um, but there are more important things in life too. Our faith, our family, our kids. You've got 3 kids now, is
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
you got like 50% more kids than I do, so I don't even understand what that's like. But
Yeah.
you've got a wonderful family and living in Canada. But we're excited to see what happens with all this, and I really appreciate you taking some time to give us, I don't know, a little behind the scenes look on life. And oftentimes we only see the outside, we only see the things that are public, and oh wow, everything must be amazing and easy, and because the outside stuff's going well. But there's so much more that happens behind the scenes in our character development, in our own character development. You're talking about developing these characters in a comic book and writing their story. Well, what about our story? What story are we writing? What choices are we making in life that write who we are? A character, they say, is the thing that people talk about you when you're not around.
Yeah. Hmm.
What kind of things are we doing that are getting people talking about us, and how are they? And is that how we would want to be talked about? And if
Yeah.
not, well, then we need to change that. And so sometimes these jumps and these leaps aren't quite so big as leaving DC and starting a brand new comic company and upsetting the apple cart, as it were. Sometimes it's changing how we act to our spouses or our kids, changing our intentions so that we bring joy to the people around us instead of depression and sorrow.
Yeah.
And those changes can be just as big as a career change or career jump, but it's all possible. When we wake up in the morning, it's a new day, and it's a new chance to give back to the world, to do things better, to better our art, or better our character, or better our personality, or better our marriages, or our families, or our faith. But no,
Yeah.
it's just it's wonderful to hear the other side. I've heard your other side for a lot of years, and I love you, and I'm so glad that you came on and gave me a little bit of your time today.
Yeah.
So we'll see you again. You don't have to run off. I'll press stop here in just a second. Don't run away yet. We are. I'll schedule another interview here with Jay in about a month and a half, 2 months thereabouts. We're February, yeah. So April, and we'll get a little step forward on how Ghost Machine is doing, and specifically, I mean, I want to know what happens to Rook now. So
Yeah.
I might just have to order the comic.
Yeah.
It's a pre-order thing too, right? It's like you send out a pre-order to be shipped to different comic book stores.
Yeah, essentially, comic book stores are the retailers who order the books from the distributors. So, one thing we like to say is, go out there, call your local shop, pre-order a copy with them. They'll hold you a copy of the book, because they usually, shops only order as many as the pre-orders come in, right? I mean, that's kind of how it works.
Sure, it's a
And
business
so,
model idea.
yeah, so it's we're trying to get the word out, because there's a lot of new comics and different things coming out, and so we want people, like you said, this is an opportunity for people to get in on the ground floor at an issue 1. Like, imagine jumping into Batman at issue 1. Like, I'm not saying
that would be valuable nowadays.
I'm not saying Rook's going to become Batman. It'd be great if it did, but it's like, imagine getting into those stories at the ground floor, and then being able to read the adventure as it unfolds. It's a different kind of reading experience than jumping into issue 375 of Spider-Man, and then kind of figuring out where you are in this grand story.
Not to mention, it's been diluted by 16 different producers doing movies about it. So
exactly. So that's kind of what we're doing right now. We're really trying to push that. But no, thanks again for having me. I'm actually now that you mentioned like talking about the family and the faith, that's the stuff that excites me too. Like it's great to talk about the comic book side of things, but
Yeah.
it's still my job, right? It's like I could talk for hours about my children and my wife and so that kind of thing. And there's again, like you said, there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that people never see, and there's a lot of those moments where you're feeling self doubt about what you're doing, and your wife comes and she says a kind word,
I
it
remember a
changes your
story.
whole attitude, like,
I remember a story from you where you were struggling. There, you had some bad review on one of your books, and you were struggling with that. And you actually had Sarah responding and reading through the negative comments because you couldn't do it. Not you couldn't. It wasn't helpful for you to do. It wasn't getting you where you needed to go. And so Sarah came in and took care of that for you. But it's interesting because a good marriage is two complementary opposite people together on the same goal, shall we say,
yeah.
moving the same direction.
Hmm.
And I know my wife has strengths that I
Yeah.
couldn't dream of having, but are essential to the proper functioning of our family and for us to thrive as a family.
Yeah.
So I too am excited about that part. I mean, as I say, career is wonderful. It's essential, but how much more valuable is it to
Hmm.
have a great family and a great marriage and great kids? Um, the way I put that is if you don't know, ask somebody who's lost theirs,
Hmm. Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you'll find out pretty quickly.
Yeah. And and
So we
and
want to
there's
keep our values straight. We want to keep the things that are important, that are supposed to be on top, on top. I've had a lot of conversations with people over the years. One of my favorite was this guy. He'd succeeded mightily in business, and he retired at 48 or 50 and moved to a vacation town. I met him at 72 years old, and he'd been living in this vacation town for 22 years. And he said, I said, would you have done anything different in life? After a long time, he answered. He says, yeah, I would have. It culminated this year. I invited all my three kids and their families all down to this vacation town for Christmas time. And he said all of them said, no, we don't want to come. We don't even know you. And I thought, he said, I think if I was doing it again, I would do it a little bit differently.
yeah.
But when we're in the throes of this portion of our lives, we're focused sometimes on the wrong things, but I know you're not, which is why you're so much fun to talk to. So next time we're together, we'll dive into family and faith and some other crazy things that happen around the world. So Jay, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Dave.
Um, yeah, we'll talk to you again soon.
All right.
Don't leave just yet.